Hi you guys, welcome back to another reptile episode on the channel. I'm shattered. I've driven all the way to Southampton from Northamptonshire. Spent the day at school teaching kids about why should zoos exist or why shouldn't zoos exist. You know which way I'm going to go. Very biased. Luckily, all the kids went, yeah, we think zoos should exist. And we explained why and why we keep and breed animals in captivity. Quite tiring because it's a long drive home after that kind of work. Little video I put together. I wasn't going to. I didn't start recording this when I did it. And I thought, do you know what? It might help some of you guys out. So I don't have any time at the moment. I'm really spread myself too thin at the moment. There's too much to get done with these outdoor reptile enclosures as well as all the other stuff I have to do. So I wanted to build a nice background in the indigo snake enclosure. I talked about this in a previous video, but I want it to be simple, relatively inexpensive, relatively quick to do, and I wanted to be able to put it in and take it out. So I've built something that literally screws in at the end. Minimal materials, but I've got to tell you that the budget side of it, the cost of building materials at the moment is just ludicrous around here. So the materials cost one decent sized sheet of 1-inch thick polystyrene, ordinary cheap builder's foam, expanding foam, and just plain old clear silicone, and a bag of kiln dried driveway sand, very fine dried sand. And what I wanted to produce was a rock effect background for the indigo snake enclosure, but three-dimensional. The whole point of this wasn't just to make it look better in there, was to give it ledges that make that enclosure 3D from the snake's activity sort of surface area point of view. So ledges it can slither along, ledges that are wide enough for it to curl up on, ledges it can get between. So a three-dimensional working background. I didn't film the very beginning, as I've already said, but I'm going to overlay this with what I did. So basically, I measured the back of the vivarium with the glass out. I measured the space I would need to put in a background, a 1-inch thick, originally, polystyrene sheet background. I left a bit of gap at the top. I left maybe 1 inch at the top, inch to the side, to give myself some wiggle room when we installed the finished product. There's nothing worse than, you know, you've built something nice and then you're hacking it to bits to get it to fit. I cut a little bit out where the vents were in this particular vivarium to make the ledges. So we cut a sheet of polystyrene out to fit the back of the vivarium. To make the ledges, I literally cut off rectangles of polystyrene, bigger than what you probably want to start with, and stack them up like that, like my fingers, in layers. Some were just 1 layer thick, some were 2 or 3 stacked together like a sandwich, because I wanted to give a look of rock strata, a look of thicker rocks and thinner rocks sticking out. So once we got that basic setup, it was a case of covering everything in expanding foam. You need more than you think. A 4x2 sheet background I was working with, you're going to need at least three, I reckon, decent sized tubes of expanding foam. And those rocky ledges that I've made from polystyrene were just adhered onto the back sheet with the foam and everything, the whole of the ledges and the whole of the background covered in expanding foam and left to go off. So we'd leave it at least 24 hours and then it all gets huge. But what you really want to try is to cover all of the polystyrene, because sometimes the next layer of silicone, the acid in that polystyrene is a bit of a swine when you're using solvents. Often it just disintegrates and dissolves into nothing with any solvent-based glue. So if you can, cover everything with the expanding foam. Once that's gone off the next day, then you got the nice creative fun bit. So if you watch my my dart frog enclosure build, this one, wherever it's going to go, this one, link in the description, just bear in mind cleanliness, workspace, expanding foam and silicone gets on everything, all over your hands, all over your clothes, all over your house, if you're not meticulous and methodical. Set up a workspace, get yourself some throwaway disposable gloves that you can change as you need to, using a nice serrated knife. Stanley knife, razor blade, it's actually quite hard work. A decent serrated knife works like a saw and it really carves easily into the expanding foam. Once again, when you're carving that foam and you're remaking these lovely ledges and wavy edges and you're trying to make that kind of a rocky look, Try not, if you can help it, to carve into the polystyrene. Again, you're going to expose the polystyrene. I did a bit. I covered it in silicone. It kind of didn't melt. It was okay. Best to keep it covered if you can. So you've carved your rocky background. You've used your knife. And another tip that's really important, you've got to carve off all of the foam's surface. Even if a little bit looks just about right, it doesn't need carving, just shave off the outer surface of that set foam. It's really smooth and shiny. Nothing will stick to it. You've got to expose that rough bubbly surface underneath, just enough for your silicone to stick. You've got your shape. You've cleaned up. You've banged off all the loose bits of foam. You've put it in the bin. You've cleaned up your workspace. Get a fresh pair of gloves back on. Using a clear silicone in a silicone gun. Do patches at a time, not the whole thing. You will have silicone curing and nothing will stick to it. Patches at a time. Experiment now. Apply the silicone liberally over the area you're going to work on. And then use your gloved hand. It is messy. Smearing it. Smear it all over that foam patch. So you've got a reasonable thickness, but it doesn't have to be mega thick. Just use your hand to smear that silicone over that area. And here's the bit where it can get messy. Get yourself a big old cupful or plastic scoop of your dried sand. Pour it all over that area that you've silicone. Put plenty on. And then I use my other gloved hand to pat it down, trying to stick as much of that sand into. You need to use your hand to pat that sand into the silicone. Next bit, carry on. You can tip that off. I use a big sheet of cardboard so I could tip the loose sand off. Carry on siliconing the next patch I'm going to work on. Pouring dried sand all over it, patting it down. I wanted a relatively pale sandstone strata rock background. The reason was I was thinking this, it'll look kind of good. Sandy area where they come from, indigo snakes, sandy soil. And I was using the cheapest expanding foam I could, which is the yellow builder stuff, not the black or the grey pond expanding foam, which is much dearer. So I thought a little bit of yellowish behind the background. The yellowish sand, it's going to look like sandstone. It came out okay. It came out okay. I was hoping to do the back on one end of the enclosure. So when you look in there, the whole thing's like a bit of a panoramic backdrop. I've installed the background. I'm going to show you that in a second. I want to see how that went. And then I'm going to finish off the side panel and probably put it in and see what it looks like. Literally, I've just used 4 screws with washers, penny washers, to screw through the foam background, through the polystyrene, into the wooden background of the vivarium behind. You could easily hide those with anything. I've left them on show so you can see them. And then I've used other decor to finish off the look. For something that was quite quick, when I was wrapping up with it, I did think it looks rubbish. When it's cured and installed, I think it looks okay. I'm very pleased with the shape of the carving, just made out of foam and polystyrene. But I think you will agree, if I took a bit more time and actually just got maybe some acrylic spray paint, maybe a little bit of black, maybe a little bit dark sandy colour, just here and there, a little whiff of spray paint, I think would have hidden some of the show through. And just made the whole thing look better. That's something you can do. I'm just showing you something really simple, really easy that we can all do, relatively quick to do, and you can make this, you can add as much finer detail as you like to make this background look outstanding. And I think you could make a really easy and really outstanding looking background with this method. And again, you can take it out. You could adhere it to the back. I wanted to be able to get it in and out, and I wanted to make sure, of course, by screwing it on, none of the snakes or the snake can't get behind it. This background will work for anything that likes a dry substrate. It'll work in a humid environment, but for rock living lizards, snakes to climb around on, a fantastic background indeed. I'm really pleased with that side of it. I just think I could have made a better job of the finished product. If you are going to use it for something like amphibians, you must make sure that silicone is absolutely free of any additives like fungicides. Most of them have a fungicide in there. Now, if that gets in water, you know, those amphibians could absorb that through their skin. It is toxic. Don't use it. You have to be really careful. In a dry setup, probably isn't going to make any difference to the animal that lives in there. But for an amphibian, in a moist or wet environment, yeah, do not have fungicide in that silicone. It is poisonous. What else can I tell you about it? I can tell you the snake absolutely loves it. It was just the first day, seeing that snake cruising around, exploring all the nooks and crannies and setting up home there. I've took out his black hide box and I'll show you what I've done. I'm going to flip you around. Hold on. So annoyingly, he's just coming out of his shed phase. He's about to slough, so he doesn't look so good. So, what have we got? Let's go back a bit. So in the previous video, you'd have seen this was a really, really rundown enclosure. It is old and it is tatty, but of course perfectly serviceable. So we've used decor to enhance this. You can see there's a gap up the top. It is something you can move along, but of course visually you can't see it unless you really make an effort to see it. And again, a little gap at the back, but don't forget there's another panel to go on this side to match. I think, let's have a look. I think this looks and feels absolutely great. Imagine the weight if this was stacked rock, but this is just polystyrene and expanding foam. I think the actual look of the design, if I say so myself, looks really pucker. And that's just expanding foam over polystyrene. You can see there 1, 2, maybe 3 layers of polystyrene stuck against that back wall, carved over once the foam's added. I've removed his damp hide box, but instead I've put this in here, which I can fill with coir and really soak down. So he's got a sort of a much more natural, the idea was natural, a natural looking damp hide box there. He's still got somewhere to hide under here. Bless him, he should be shedding this evening or tomorrow. So an eastern indigo snake, hardly looking at his best, but what he has got now is some great nooks and crannies to hide on, to climb on, to snuggle up on. So there we are, an easy to build 3D sandstone background, and again, you decide what you think, but I think a little blowover here and there with, I don't know, dark grey, bit of black, just a whiff of spray paint, or of course just go over it again a second time with some more silicone in lots of little bare patches and throw on some more sand. Hope you've enjoyed the video. It is there to help you. It wasn't a video I planned. I just thought, you know what, I'm doing this, I ought to start doing a bit of photography. Not easy when you're covered in silica, no one to help me film, so I've just overlaid this video so you can sort of get the idea. But from what we had, do you know what, you know, I've pointed out the rubbish bits, but I think that's all right. I think that's a way better looking enclosure than a bit of white hardboard that this did have on the back there. Please subscribe, please watch the playlist, it all helps out. Oh yeah, jumping back and forth, that's all I've attached it with. Absolutely solid, tight to the back, no one can get behind it. Your support is greatly appreciated, guys. The next video will be back to some kind of how-to or a species profile. We'll actually go back to meeting some of my amazing reptiles. I just wanted to show you something that I was happened to be doing.